I'm excited. Benjamin barely slept.
I barely slept because I'm excited, and also because my dog thinks my bed is her bed. So
Yeah, I know that problem.
my wife's somewhere there, but it's mostly my dog's feet in my face.
I was doing some prep for the show, and I noticed one of the photos that you had all geared up with Leland Melvin, and I realized it was one of the few photos I've seen of him um, not with his dogs.
Yeah, yeah. Have you seen a picture of him with his in his suit with his dogs?
I love
Yeah.
that photo.
Yeah,
It's one of
that's a
the
good
best
picture.
photos there
Yeah,
is.
yeah, that's a
If
good
there's
one.
if there's a possible like number one advertisement, you should try out to be an astronaut. That should be
Yeah,
the photo. Next to someone floating in space, but number one, NASA loves dogs. That's a winner.
yeah, yeah.
Rex, we're so thankful to have you on the show. I mean, we've been doing this. This is just the start of season 9, and um, the entire time it's kind of been Benjamin's dream to get an astronaut on, and I thought it was quite. It
We've
was
had a couple
quite.
checklists. Our little bucket list. We want the show to be listened to on every continent. We got that,
Yep.
and that was a hard one. And we'd love to have an astronaut, of course. And here we are. It's
How many listeners do you guys have?
about 6,000 now, right, Coffee?
Wow.
Yep. Something
I
around that.
run
Yeah.
Science Actually on Facebook and have about 240,000 some odd fans there.
Uh-huh.
And Kavi runs his science communication platform, and he's an actual astrophysicist. I'm just a big science fan,
Okay.
and so he's on his platform is Fun Fact Science, and he has this little following there, and then the show has its own groupings and groupies, whatever,
Groupies. We have
and
groupies.
together it's quite a substantial little audience, and I'm also part of the Space Hipsters fan group, which has its own like 70 something thousand members. Some of them also astronauts and people who worked at NASA and stuff like that. So they all know about the show that we got the chance to speak with you. And speaking of which, somebody I met there. Where is it? I have his name. I just lost his name. Oh yes, Daniel Palmer, your suit technician, wanted
Oh
me to
yeah,
say
yeah. I know Daniel.
he
Where'd you
wanted me
see
to say
him?
hi to you, and said you were awesome to work with, and he told me to
Yeah, tell
ask
him I
you
said
about.
hi.
I
Yeah.
will, and he told me to ask you about the boarding passes. What were they? Is that a fun little thing?
Yes. Yeah. That's a joke we play on the new guys. So yeah, if you want what time do you guys are we go okay to tell a story here before we start, or do you want to?
Go for it. We've already started recording.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
We're in the cold open. Yeah.
All right,
Yes.
good deal. Well, there's a joke we used to play on the new guys. So when you after you get suited up, they you get into the astrovan, the silver van that takes you out to the launch pad, and usually the director of flight crew operations, he gets on the bus with you, but they stop at about 3 miles from the pad so he can get off and the rest of the crew can go off to the pad. And just before he gets off, he goes, "Okay, I need all your boarding passes." And all the guys who've flown before start reaching into their pocket and they pull something out. This could be a boarding pass. And the new guys are like, "What are you guys talking about?" Some of our rookies were not pleased at that, but it was pretty funny.
Oh God, it's hysterical. Is it just a joke that you're looking for something, or did you actually have like a prop?
No, I think they may have given us something to pull out, but I can't remember about that. The other guys, they obviously didn't have any, so they were like what? So
In a
it was
panic.
pretty funny.
So was that joke prank pulled on you on your first flight?
No, it wasn't. I missed that one. I think so. I think I got away with that one.
Oh, that's awesome. That's fantastic.
But is it true that they still make you do like a customs border security kind of thing when you're coming back in?
A cousin? No, not really. Not that I recall. They don't. You do get a travel voucher. We had to file a travel voucher from Houston to the Kennedy Space Center to low Earth orbit, and then back to the Kennedy Space Center. So we did get to keep that though. So that was kind of fun.
That's hysterical.
Oh, that's very cool.
That's the
Amazing.
most
We
publicized
have
flight on the planet, and you still need some kind of paperwork to prove it.
That's right. Yep.
Well, I guess we can officially say welcome to all of our listeners and viewers to another episode of Science Actually Presents The Nerd and the Scientist. And this episode, we are absolutely blessed to be joined by NASA astronaut Rex Walheim. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been Benjamin's dream to get an astronaut on the podcast. And I feel like what Benjamin's going to have to do for this intro is to use this song by Jim Brickman, Dream Come True, which I believe was the song that you picked as your wake-up song on your first flight.
Indeed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure was.
Okay.
Was that a tough?
No,
was
you
that
got
a
to
tough
pick a wake-up song.
No, that was
I
my wake-up
knew
call
the
on
wake-up songs.
my second mission. What's that?
I've known about the wake-up songs, and that's a wonderfully hysterical and fun tradition. But I thought it was just something Mission Control sent up to you at their whim, not that you got to choose something.
Yeah, we get to choose something, and usually the families choose it. We choose it together and stuff. And for the last flight though, there was only 4 of us, and so there's probably 12 days I guess we had total on orbit. And so they solicited a bunch of wake up music from celebrities and stuff, which was really neat. And because it was the last space shuttle flight, and so we had the one wake up one morning. We were woken up by Paul McCartney, basically. It was awesome. It was just I think I think it was either Good Morning Sunshine or I think that may have been what it was, but it was really neat. So that was fun. And then we had the other. I think Beyonce did one for us. I think Elton John did also. So it was. But what do you say? It's a recording, obviously, but you got to say something, because he's going to hear it back. So what do you say to Paul McCartney? So you try to thank him for the music he's made and stuff and things he's done over the years. So that's a lot of fun.
Oh wow! I feel like I wouldn't know. Like, how do you compare one to the other? Like, you have Sir Elton John and Sir Paul McCartney, and then Beyonce, one after the other, day after day.
It was pretty impressive. It was neat. So I enjoyed it, and I picked one from Keith Urban, Days Gone By. So that was my personal one. So that was I enjoyed that. And then on my first mission, it was. Let's see, was All Star by Smash Mouth. So that was a song my kids and I used to play when they were really listening. My first mission, my kids were really young. One was 4, the other was 5. And then as my later flights, they were a little bit older, so they could enjoy it a little bit more and understand a little bit more, which was fun.
That's fantastic. So cool. So when you're driving around your day-to-day and one of these songs comes on the radio, you just like drift off a little bit and daydream and like, oh yeah, I heard that.
Yeah, it does. There are certain songs that bring it back too. Yeah, some of the songs you heard on the way to in quarantine and stuff like that, they kind of stick with you too, which is fun. So,
how long is quarantine?
For the shuttle program, it was only 7 days. Now with this with the station program, they do it for 14 days. I think they did it for Ryan also, because I think it gives you a little bit, with the coronavirus and stuff like that, 14 days is a little bit longer to give you, go through the incubation period. And if you catch something, you have a little bit of time to get better before you fly. So, but we only did, so we did 3 days, at JSC, and then 4 nights at KSC before we, Kennedy Space, before we went to fly.
Okay.
I'm curious in terms of, like, as you mentioned, so STS 135 was the last shuttle flight. At that time, did you have a feeling? Were you concerned that this was kind of like the end of human spaceflight or anything like that? Was it clear to you that there was going to be some continuity with the ISS?
Yeah, I knew there'd be definitely continuity with the ISS, obviously, because they were going to still fly through with the Russian Soyuz spacecraft. But then I knew that eventually the commercial crew companies would come along too, with SpaceX and Boeing. So I had a good idea that it was still coming on. but there was definitely a gap, as you know, was except for going
Mhm.
to Russia. I remember after 135 going down to the Kennedy Space Center, in the couple years after my flight, and it was dead. It was really sad. I mean, there was just nothing going on there,
Hmm.
and there's still people working there, but there just wasn't much going on before the commercial crew program came along. Now it's jumping now. You got the Ryan going on there. You got the SpaceX and Boeing should hopefully get back in the game here pretty soon. So there's a lot of stuff going on.
Very cool.
With you having actually had the hands-on experience of actually building the space station, um, now that it's going to be retired, which is sad to think about. I mean, how do you feel about that? And also, stupid question. I don't know that it's even a possibility, but is there like a souvenir you're able to bring down from the space station? I don't know what it could have possibly been. It doesn't
Yeah.
have like can't really take off a window, but uh,
No, we did. We actually did. On my first mission, there were some caps to some electrical connectors that we had to take off, and then plug some electrical cables in there. And so we pulled all the connector caps off, and I strung them onto a retaining device, and then we brought them back in. And so we brought them back home, and there was no plan for how to dispose of them. And so one of the guys, Jerry Ross, said, "Hey, let's just keep them." So he gave us each one, and so I had one of those, and we also have it's also fun. It's fun to have stuff that was actually outside EVA in space, and
yeah,
so that's why that one's neat. And then usually when we do a spacewalk, we use a number of things called Russian wire ties. They're just basically kind of like a hanger you can bend around a little bit more. They're more bendy than a hanger, but you can use them to attach things to the space station and twist them, and then a cable will stay there. And so we usually have several extra ones that we put on some of our restraint tethers and stuff like that. So we go out with several of them, and we come in. We would take them off, and then we'd actually put them in a bag so we could take them home. And so we brought those home, and I gave those out to my EVA instructors, because they've been working with for so long, and so they got to have a piece that went out in space, went on EVA with us. So that was kind of fun too. That's a nice souvenir.
is that something that hangs over your tool bench in your garage now? And as you're doing some
No,
little
not
home
right. I
improvement
have it.
project,
I
you're
have it
thinking,
somewhere. I haven't displayed it yet. Though I should do that though. Someday I will. So, but
I'm
then
sure that the junk that you have in your drawers, like, would be the prized possessions of the average person.
yeah, I have a lot of stuff. It's funny because, um, some of the stuff people get used to some of the stuff. So I had this friend who I worked with at JSC even when I was a flight controller before I flew in space, and he worked deceleration systems back on the Apollo program even. And so I was over
wow,
his desk one day, and he was showing me some of the stuff he had. He goes, "Hey, do you want this?" And what is it? It's a piece of parachute from Apollo 10. And I go, "You got to be kidding me! It's a real parachute that went to the moon, And so sure, so he gets a piece of it, and so I kept it and stuff. He had all sorts of little knickknacks that they would just give him, after the flights and stuff. So he had plenty of that stuff. So yeah, I'll love to see that. So that was pretty cool. So have some little mementos like that too. The funny thing was
that
that
would
with the space shuttle, what do you do with the space shuttle? It comes down and it lands. And it's like, hey, do you need that? Do you need that anymore? You don't need any of that stuff anymore. It's going to the hangar. We didn't take anything out, so we didn't pillage the space shuttle. But it was kind of funny though that it was going to the hangar after us. So it's not like anybody's going to be using it afterwards.
is it true that when you come back in from an EVA, your suit kind of carries that a weird burnt kind of smell
Yeah, it
that
does. It's
I've
kind
read
of hard.
about?
Yeah, it's kind of like a burnt. You don't smell it so much when you're getting out of the suit because by then it's probably worn off and stuff. But when you bring somebody
Sure.
else in, then you can probably smell it a little bit. But yeah, it's got a little bit of a kind of burnt smell. People describe it as
That's so cool.
So
Trying to
weird.
understand. Yeah. So space isn't empty, Kovi. It's filled with barbecue smells.
yeah. You got atomic oxygen and stuff. So you got a little bit of stuff that comes off and makes
In
things
my,
smell.
I must have missed the barbecue smells chapter of my undergrad space physics course.
That's why too much book learning. Do more science articles.
Too much book. We had a few questions from listeners and fans. Quite a few. We probably won't have time to get to all of them. But one question that was asked by Marco via Facebook was, when you cry in space, And I know the answer to this might be different whether you're on an EVA or inside of a vehicle. But when you cry in space, do the tears roll down your face or do they float out of your eyes? What?
No, I have that happened once when I was actually because I was laughing so hard. The we were getting ready to come home on Atlantis on my first flight, and we had a mixed crew. We had male and females on there, and so whenever we Ellen was our female crew member, and so whenever we wanted to change or something down the mid deck, because you have a flight deck and a mid deck on the shuttle, whenever you want to change it on the mid deck, say, hey, Ellen, stay up there, we're gonna, this is the locker room down here, so we're gonna, so we can change, and we do all that, and then we can do vice versa for her if we need to. And so we had done that all mission long, and then we're getting ready to come home, and we had Steve Smith and I was riding on the mid deck for the way home, and so Jerry Ross was the last. He was suiting everybody up and putting everybody in their seats, and so he had got everybody in their suits and in their seats on the flight deck. So Ellen was obviously in her suit, and had her harness and stuff on, so she was staying there. And so Steve and I had our suits on. So now Jerry was the only one who didn't have a suit on yet. And so he has to come down and get his suit on. So he knows Ellen's upstairs. So he comes flying down and he drops his shorts. And we go, Jerry, the camera. He had the camera was running. It was not being down, but it was running. And sure enough, Steve gets up and goes over to the camera and turns it around. And he looks back on it and goes, "Yep, yeah." So the full moon was rising, so it was a perfect
No
shot.
way.
And like I said, I was laughing so hard, I had these little tear balls, and they go in the corner of your eyes, and they just stay there. It was so funny. But the interesting thing about that was, probably 15 years later or 10 years later, Jerry Ross, the guy who this was happened to, he was retiring. And so I was giving him a little roasting him during the retirement ceremony, and I told the story, and I showed, I said, hey, yeah, so he he dropped his pants in front of the camera, and of course we rewinded it and typed over it, and I said, or did we? And so I actually got the actual footage. And I played it all the way up until then, and he was sweating bricks. I said, self-respecting astronaut would tape over footage like that when it could be so useful on a day like today. And so I showed it to him, and it came up just before he dropped his pants, and we put censored, and let it play on. So we gave him a bit of a scare there.
That's
fantastic.
amazing.
I can't believe that. Yeah, I guess it's not. I would imagine there's not that much privacy up there.
No,
So
no.
it must have been an easy miss.
Yeah.
All right, I think a large group of other questions we got from listeners, and it's all, I'm sure you've heard this 1,000 times, but it can all be kind of grouped in a singular category. So first off, why do you think there are so many questions that has to do with bodily functions up in space? It's just
Well, people are just curious. They relate to that, and so I was just at a school, a couple weeks ago, and I got the question. I did 5 classes of a friend of mine, so I did it 5 times, which is unusual. We don't usually do that many times, but I did it 5 times. I think every single time I pretty much got it. So people, because especially kids, they're just they want to know, they want to relate to it, and that's something they can relate to. So I think that's why you get that so much.
All right.
I guess,
is it true that you cannot burp in space, or it just doesn't, or it just comes out wrong?
I think you certainly can. I don't see why you wouldn't think that.
All right. Let's see. Guess you can.
I guess on that topic of what you were saying that happened with the school classes, we had a question from Blue Sky. Somebody asked, what question are you most tired of being asked? Like, is there one question that you're constantly hit with?
That's probably how do you go to the bathroom in space. You just answered it so many times. It's like, and I don't mind, I understand, but it's, you get it so many times. It's fun when, every once in a while somebody will come out with a question. Wow, I haven't thought about that one. It brings back memories you haven't thought about. But so sometimes they surprise you with things which is fun. So, but that's the one you get the most. It used to be one of the things we get questioned a lot, especially before we flew. So you do stuff like you go to, they send you off to do these public appearance stuff where you sign autographs and stuff, you sign your picture and things like that. And so you go down, and first one comes with, have you flown in space yet? No. When are you going to? I don't know yet. So the next person comes along, have you flown in space yet? Nope. So you have to get questions so many times. So you figure Okay, finally, when I go into fly into space, have you flown in space yet? You go, yes. You go, how many times? You know, just once. You know, it's eventually get to do. So I think, well, obviously, you know, in the other question, have you been to the moon? No. And so, but one realized that the question would never end, is because they asked John Young, you know, or somebody, have you been to the moon? Yep. How many times? You know, so you have to. It just continually goes, whether no matter how many times you've done something. So, but it's kind of fun to talk about. But for a while there, you know, it took me 5.5 years to fly my first flight. So there was no guarantee you were actually get to fly. And so, you know, at times you start
Sure.
thinking this is never going to happen, you know. But so everything changes once you fly, because now you have all the memories. You can, you know, no matter what happens from there on out, they can't take it away from you. It's like your birthday, you know. And the neat thing is about it is you have all these stories, that things that happen. And so before, it used to be when you went on the public appearances, you'd go and you'd answer the questions, and they say, well, what's it like in space? And they go, well, I haven't been there, but this is what I hear. You know, you kind of something like that. So you know, it's hard, because you know how to answer the questions, but you don't have the personal stories. And so, man, once you fly, all of a sudden you got your your crew video from the mission, and that you can show, and you can answer, you know, can show slides and answer questions and stuff, and it makes it a whole lot easier, which is a lot more fun.
Here's an actual question about that. Was part of your training at NASA teaching you that once you've flown, once you become an actual in-flight astronaut, that no matter what you're going to do after the rest of your life, people are just going to want to ask you about those few weeks that you spent in space, and then
Well, no,
they kind of don't have much interest?
no, they don't really tell you that. I think you kind of figure it out, but you know, it's an interesting thing, because you know, most people you interact with don't know you're an astronaut, and so the vast majority of it, almost never do people say, oh, unless they work with you. You know, they know you from somewhere else, or they work with you and stuff like that. But most they don't. So it's really nice, because you can have that anonymity. You know, you can blend back in. You know, there's some people who've done something, you know, that they've become famous for, you know, or they're a movie star or something like that. They can't turn the fame off. You know, you know, change into civilian clothes, and you know, I am indistinguishable from anybody else, and so I can take that off, turn that off, like with like a light switch, which is wonderful, you know, because you can enjoy it and you can talk to people about it, you can do, you know, presentations and stuff. But then if you know, what I enjoy most is at the end, it's like, you know, just blend back into, you know, natural life. So
Just turn back into Clark Kent, a mild-mannered
yes, that's
reporter.
right. Yeah, yeah.
That is kind of cool.
That's cool. I never thought about that. What advice would you have for people who come after you, either people who are thinking about being astronauts or getting into that field?
um, I highly recommend it. I mean, it's the most incredible thing I've ever had a chance to do, and it's just it's neat from beginning to end, even before you get assigned, but especially once you get assigned, you become part of a crew. There's nothing like being part of a space crew, because you just, you know, you train together, you work together, you know, you solve problems together. Everything you do is together as a team, and it's really an incredible experience. And then when you get closer to flying and stuff, and it starts, this is going to be real. And then, you know, getting to fly, it's just such an incredible, you know, adventure. And there's no way, you know, it's a blur. Your first flight, everything is, you know, a bit of a blur, because there's so many things that are so incredible that you're seeing and doing, that it's hard to remember it all. And Jerry Ross, one of my crewmates, said, hey, just remember, take it all and take mental pictures of this stuff, because you're going to forget it. And you're thinking, how can you forget it? But you do, because you're just so overwhelmed by incredible visions and stuff like that you see and you do, through the whole time. And then you get to get down and get to see your family again. You know, it's a very intense experience too, because you know, as you get close to flying, you know, you have to do guest lists of who you're gonna invite to the launch and stuff like that, and where are they going to sit and things like that. And so from that perspective, it's a very odd, you know, dynamic, because it's like preparing for a wedding that you're not going to be at, because you prepare for these parties and stuff that your friends are going to be at and stuff, and you get ready to go. And I can remember people saying, "Oh, you must be so excited." And you go, yeah, you know, but I got a job to do, and this is not, you know, a zero risk thing I'm doing, you know. So it's not like going on a
Yeah.
vacation. It's very intense from that point. You don't know for sure you're coming back, and so that's in the back of your mind, and you know, it influences how you know, deal with your family and stuff like that. So it's hard from that perspective. But like I say, I would highly encourage anybody who's interested in doing it, because it is such an incredible adventure. Really, it's amazing, and especially like, you know, being up at the space station when because you're this outpost of humanity, reaching out into the universe, because there's nobody else there, and you get this impression, like one of my crewmates said, that you're at the toehold of the people, clawing their way off the earth, and you're in this group
Wow.
of 6 to 10 people, or 10 to 13 people, however many it is, and you're all together there, and you're one team, and you got the Russian astronauts, American astronauts, and everybody together, working together, and you form a team. And the U.S. and Russia don't get along very well as countries right now, but boy, in space they get along like brothers and sisters. Everybody works together, and you're one big team. It's the best example of international cooperation I've ever seen. And the interesting thing about it is you look how things have changed. My father was a B-17 pilot in World War II. He didn't get overseas, but he was training during World War II. And so when part of his pre-flight training was at an Air Force base called Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama. And so on my first mission, when we were on the way to the Cape, when we were in quarantine, we took our T-38s and we flew, and we got gas halfway to the Kennedy Space Center, and we landed at that very base, Maxwell Air Force Base, where my dad used to be stationed. And then we went on to Kennedy Space Center and flew the flight. And so, could you imagine if somebody tapped my 19-year-old father on his shoulder back then, and said, "Hey, someday you're gonna have a son." He wasn't married or anything. He said, "We have a son, okay? And he's gonna fly here on a jet," which is pretty much unheard of in 1942, 43. And so, if that didn't get him, okay, he's going to go down to the Kennedy Space Center, and he's going to fly in space on a space shuttle. It'd be Buck Rogers by then. But to top it all off, he told him, and by the way, this is in World War II. In his career, he's going to fly with a German astronaut and a Japanese astronaut. It's like that would be inconceivable to him. So it's amazing how things have changed, but it's amazing, how the space program can bring people together too.
I wonder which of those pieces of that story at that time he would consider the most improbable.
Yeah, right.
Flying on a jet, flying into space, or flying with a German and a Japanese astronaut.
Or getting married.
Those are three incredibly
yeah.
wild things. Did you
crazy.
initially set out with the idea that you wanted to be an astronaut? I know you went to UC Berkeley, and then you got a master's, I forget where else, and then the Air Force, you worked with F-16s.
Right.
Was that all part of the plan, or it just kind of happened to fall together that way?
Yeah, it was part of the plan eventually. And by the time I went to Berkeley, that was part of the plan. I mean, I knew the first space shuttle flight was coming up, and I remember teaching some school kids came in. I taught them about the space shuttle program and stuff. And I definitely want to be an astronaut then. But my real goal was to be a pilot, and because that was a realistic goal. But on top of that, if I could become an astronaut, that would be great. So my grand 10-year plan was to go to graduate from Berkeley, go to pilot training, become a pilot, then become a fighter pilot, then become a test pilot, and become an astronaut. So that's what my grand plan was. And so everything went pretty well through. I went through college and got my degree in mechanical engineering at Berkeley, and then I went down to Williams Air Force Base at pilot training, and my grand 10-year plan came off the wheels in about a month. Because what happened was I got down there and they give you a physical, one of the first things they do. And so I'd had military physicals before, but you never know what's going to be found and stuff. So so this time the doctor said he found a heart murmur, and it wasn't a health hazard that was going to not let me cause me any kind of physical problems, but in a high performance jet, they said this heart murmur could cause me to pass out potentially. So I couldn't be a pilot. So I was eliminated from pilot training. And so now I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm definitely not going to become a pilot, and it's obviously not become an astronaut, so what am I going to do with my life? And so they, at that point, they said, you can get out of the Air Force if you want to, because you couldn't become a pilot, or you can stay in and we can send you somewhere else. And so my initial reaction was kind of, hey, they kicked me, I'll kick them back, I'm going to get out and go work back in Silicon Valley, and make some money or something. And then I thought about, I worked real hard here 4 years from become a second lieutenant in the Air Force. I'd like to at least do one assignment, and see what happens. And so I said to them, hey, if I stay in, where will you send me? And they go, well, you have to tell us you're going to stay in first, and then we'll tell you where we're going to send you. And so that goes. So, but I talked. Well, I want to go to Space Command. I want to come to the Johnson Space Center if I could to be a flight controller. They said, well, So I said, okay, I want to go to Space Command. So I called the Space Command monitor. Said, hey, if I'm do get assigned to Space Command, where would I go? And he goes, well, it looks like either Colorado Springs or Sunnyvale in California. I thought, well, either of those would be great, and I wanted to be part of Space Command. So I put some letters of recommendation and said, yeah, I want to stay in and I want to go to Space Command. So I a few weeks later, they say, okay, you're going to Space Command, and so I called the same career monitor down there after a few weeks later and said, hey, I'm coming to Space Command. So where am I getting assigned? And he goes, well, looks like either Omaha, Nebraska, or Cavalier, North Dakota. And so off I went to Cavalier, North Dakota, to be a missile warning, radar operator. And so I went up there, and I was like, working midnight shifts in the middle of winter in North Dakota, thinking, how did I get here? I'm thinking this is crazy, but I did my best, and worked as hard as I could, and they gave me a sympathy factor from having been way out in the middle of North Dakota that I got my first choice of assignment coming back. So I was able to get an assignment to the Johnson Space Center to work as a flight controller. Obviously not an astronaut, so I was going to be, but at least I was going to be using my engineering degree, so I get a chance to be an engineer and to work in mission control, which is awesome. So I came down here and became a flight controller, and it was great. And then along the way, I'd heard I still wanted to fly if I could somehow. And I'd heard about a program called the Flight Test Engineer Program. Now, flight test engineers are not pilots; they're engineers. They fly in the backseat of like a fighter jet. So they fly in the backseat and help test it. So the test pilot flies in front, and the flight test engineer flies in back. And so together, you basically test out the airplane. And so they train flight test engineers at test pilot school at Edwards Air Force Base in Arizona. And so so to do that, I need a waiver for my heart murmur, because I need a different kind of physical. And they would say, okay, you can get a waiver for that, for this heart murmur you have. And then you can go become a flight test engineer. So I applied when I was down here, didn't get accepted. So I applied again. I took another assignment up to Colorado Springs, worked up there for a while, and was able to apply a couple years later. And I got accepted to a test pilot school as a flight test engineer. So I went over to the academy, which is nearby, and said, hey, I need a waiver for my heart murmur. And so they examined me, and he says, well, you don't need a waiver because you don't have a heart murmur. It turns out that if that what the diagnostic criteria for heart murmur, the kind that they said I had changed in those 6 or 7 years, and the diagnostic criteria, the diagnostic tests, the echocardiograms, stuff like that, those had gotten better. And so it turns out I didn't have a heart murmur, So at that point, I could have potentially gone back and tried to become a pilot, but I'd worked my way up the engineering route for 6 years or so, and I'd done well, and I had a ticket in my hand to test pilot school as an engineer, and so I figured, no, I'm gonna go down and become a flight test engineer and get to fly all these kinds of airplanes. So I went down to Edwards Air Force Base, and test pilot school is a year-long school, the hardest school I've ever been a part of. It was incredibly difficult, but it was incredibly rewarding because I was finally flying all these jets that I wanted to fly. Backseat, I'm not the pilot, but hey, that was good enough for me. So I loved it. And so that's where I had to, think about, okay, well, now I've got the experience as a flight controller. I've got the test experience, and, I should apply to be an astronaut. You dust off the old dream, but you're thinking, no, something will change. They'll change, something will come up, and there's no way that's going to happen, But I figured, oh, well, I'll give it a try. I applied once, didn't get accepted, and I applied a second time, and I got accepted. So it was a very circuitous route. And I tell this to kids a lot because everybody thinks to become an astronaut, everything has to go perfectly. You have to go to the perfect schools, get the perfect grades, the perfect jobs. Everything's got to line up. Well, not in my experience at all. And what I found was that the path I took was not as important as the persistence with which I pursued the goal. It was more important to have persistence than to have the right path. My path went. Nobody says, hey, I think I'll become an astronaut, so I think I'll get eliminated from pilot training, and I'll get sent up to North Dakota and sit in front of a radar scope. That's going to set me up perfect to be an astronaut. But I was able to make course corrections along the way, and when the opportunities came along again, I took them and was able to get there. So, like I said, it was something I dreamed about. I didn't think it was the long-term goal if it was possible, but after being eliminated from pilot training, I thought it's just not going to happen. I remember being, when I was at Williams Air Force Base, I used to like to go on Friday nights. I'd go down to the flight line and sit out there and look at all these airplanes that would come in, because on the weekends, some of the fighter jets would come in from the different bases, and the pilots would go to the O Club and stuff. And so I would sit out there, and it was quiet and dark, and I sit up there and think, man, I'm never going to get to fly these airplanes, you know? And so it just, I thought it was impossible. But the fun thing was that, you know, years later when I was an astronaut, I flew and I landed at Williams Air Force Base in a T-38 at the same base, landed there and went that, like, looked back at that same area where I used to sit down and think, could you imagine if somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, don't worry, kids, someday you're going to be flying here in a T-38 after flown in space in a space shuttle. So it's just funny how things work out and how things change the way work out, even though you might not expect it the way they were going to happen.
That's been like a regular theme of all the guests we've had in our show, engineers and scientists and everything. The path to get to this incredible goal, this position where they have, it's never been a straight line. It's always been pushing and pushing and pushing, whether it be serving time in North Dakota, serving time sitting in front of radioscope in North Dakota, or taking classes you never thought you would, or working on these research projects you never thought were going to bear fruit, and after goodness knows how long, oh my god, you discover something. I mean, it's just,
yeah,
I love that. I love the persistence perspective.
It really drives that point home that you said, Rex, of people thinking that if you want to be an astronaut, everything has to go perfectly, because as Benjamin said, all of the guests that we've had over 8 seasons of this show, not one of them has had a traditional path or a straight shot to go from where they started to their goal.
Right.
So it's amazing to hear that the same thing applies to becoming an astronaut.
Yep.
God, that's so cool.
Wow. That's incredible.
Excuse me.
Back to some questions from our listeners. The big freak out questions. I have a few questions about freaking out. I guess you can start it off with, did you have experience, rather, the overview effect the first few times you've been up there, or did you feel it every single time? And was there ever a freak out moment just privately amongst yourself, maybe the first time, when you just screamed aloud, oh my god, I'm in space?
You definitely get the overview effect. And sometimes for me, I think it's kind of after you come back and realize what you saw and what you did, and it kind of sinks. For me, it kind of sank in later. And I have this picture that I like to show of the Middle East from space, and you look at it and it looks so beautiful from there. Then you look down and you think, man, that's some of the most war-torn areas of the world right down there. You had Israel and Syria and Iraq and stuff, and so but from up there, it looks like this peaceful place. Then you look on the edge of the earth, and you see this thin blue line, and it looks just this thin. I mean, it's just this little band. It's beautiful. The pictures can't do it justice, because it's just this gorgeous blue, but it's this big. And you realize that is all that's keeping us alive, and it really gets your attention there. Like, it's just, and you get this, and beyond it is the sky, the space behind it. It's black, and it's the deepest black you've ever seen. It's not even the color black. It's a void. It's an absolute absence of color, and you get that sense from up there. And you hear some of the people who do the space tours and flights, and they get that same sense. I know William Shatner said the same thing. Just the black is just so impressive, because it's so dark and it's so deep. So you realize the planet is flying through this deep black abyss, and it really shows you that we really ought to take care of this place, because it's a pretty neat place.
Wow. Sorry, I have questions to follow up, but I think I'm just like internalizing that, because the positivity that comes with the overview effect, I guess I've never considered the yin to that yang of what you're describing with the void. Did you get a chance, were there any points during your time in space that you were actually able to see stars and to see, shining lights between the void?
Yes. So if you obviously you're going around the Earth every 90 minutes. So the first 45 minutes you're in front of the Earth, and it's nice and sunny, and you can see everything, and it works great. You get back behind the Earth, and it gets dark. It gets really dark. Now, if you're inside the vehicle and you turn the cockpit lights down, you can see the stars really well. If you let your eyes, get adjusted, and it's beautiful, and you can see the aurora and stuff, and the thunderstorms are gorgeous and stuff like that. So you can really see that. When you're out spacewalking, you can't see any stars because you have helmet lights on during the nighttime. So the only way to see the stars is if you turn your helmet lights off, which is scary. And so I don't recall that I ever did that. I could see maybe 1 or 2 stars, but that was about it. But if you want to see the stars when you're spacewalking, you had to turn the lights off, and that's it's a pretty gutsy call.
During when you're actually out there doing a spacewalk, I can only imagine you have a checklist of actual work you have to do, and there's a long series of things you have to do because you're trying to stay focused. But is does anything is there like an amount of time allotted in your time outside to just for you just to take in the view just to appreciate it, or do they just
It
is it
happens by
everything
chance.
monitored by
No, because
chance?
everything is so rushed that you have to get everything done. And on my second mission, I was the lead spacewalker, so it was my responsibility to get all the spacewalk tasks done, and so that was a lot of responsibility. And I knew I would look at the back of the payload bay of the shuttle, in certain days, and I see all the equipment that's out there, and I have to get every one of those pieces of equipment out onto the space station, and I have to get everything that's supposed to come back home into the shuttle. And until you do that, you haven't succeeded in your mission, And the last thing you want to do is round trip some hardware. There's some hardware you brought all the way up to space, and you just didn't get around to putting it on the space station. That would be a big deal. And so the clock is ticking, 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 ticking. But every once in a while, you'll be stopped for something. And one of the times was I was riding the end of the robotic arm, and I was holding this big nitrogen tank. And the ground calls up, say, "Hey Rex, hang on a second, we got to reconfigure the arm." And so I'm thinking, well, that's great. I can just kind of look around. So I just kind of hang out there, and I can let go of this tank, even though it's like 400 pounds. I can let go with one hand because it's steady as a rock. It was very steady, and I can look down. And I look down, and I see Ireland. I go, "Is that Ireland?" They go, "Yeah." And I watched Ireland and Europe go off into the distance and into the sunset. It was spectacular. And the funny thing is, Ireland, it was a beautiful day, so you rarely get that in Ireland. And one of my crewmates, Dan Tani, was his wife's from Ireland, so he'd been up there for 4 months, and he was going to come down with us. And he had been trying to get pictures of Ireland for the entire time he was up there and hadn't done it. And so he had actually he had set his alarm to, when he was going to have Ireland pass, and he'd go out and take a picture. Well, he heard me, saying, "Wow, is that Ireland?" And he was in a press conference, so he couldn't leave. And apparently he heard his watch go beep, 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 beep. And he realized, oh man. So I got this beautiful view on my first time. So he eventually got a couple pictures of it later, but it was pretty funny. But probably one of the best ones was at the end of my last spacewalk on my second mission. It was the last time I did a spacewalk, and I was just getting ready to go into the airlock, which, okay, the mission's done. So everything is complete. All I got to do is go in the airlock and hook up. And then Dex, the pilot, says, "Hey, Rex, we're coming up over the coast of California." I go, "Oh, I got to see this." So I tethered off because, like I said, the mission, the spacewalk was done. So the pressure was pretty much off. Tethered off. So I look down, and here comes the coast of California right over San Francisco. So I could see the Bay Area. I could see the whole area. And it was clear. So if I probably could have seen as far as, up to Washington down to Mexico if I could look around. So it was spectacular, and just sit there for a little while and watch California come underneath me, and then go, okay, time to go in. So stuff like that happens, but it's a little bit rare and few and far between. So you kind of have to enjoy it when you can. Take it. Okay, I got to peek now. Or something. You'll just all of a sudden look down and go, "Whoa, that's the Kennedy Space Center." And you look down there. That's the coast of Florida. Pretty darn cool. So when you see that, it's pretty
Nice.
neat. Well, the other time that was fun was on my second mission. The first time I was gonna one of the times I was getting ready to go outside, and I was surprised how I wasn't really worried. It felt like one of the water runs. Because I'd done it before and stuff, so I wasn't too upset. It's like, hey, this is kind of like an NBL run, the neutral buoyancy lab where we practice. So we opened up the hatch, and I get ready to take off my cooling unit, basically the umbilical. I take it off, and ice crystals go off, and they float off into space. And I'm going, "Whoa, we're not in the NBL now." It's like it's quite a sensation. And I could see Europe going by again. It was Switzerland and Germany going by. So at one time, it's really neat.
Oh my goodness. It's the best geography lesson you could possibly teach.
It is. It's fun, especially if you're a geography nerd. If I like geography really well, and so I would try to study up a little bit. And when we had simulations during preparation for the mission, we would be doing stuff, and we go, "Okay, geo challenge," and we go up to the flight deck, and without looking at the world map computer, we'd look out the visuals to see where are we. And so we would look and figure, and I was pretty good at it. My crewmates call me Frommer on the last ones, the Frommer guides. But you look over, and you could pretty much tell a lot of the times there's certain places you could, it was hard to tell, especially in Central Asia, because it just blends all together. So when we were there, we'd say, oh yeah, we're over what the Heckistan, so you couldn't tell exactly where you were. But
Speaking of fun nicknames, I understood that you are part of a very elite club called the Sardines.
yes.
Oh, what's
Yeah, the
this?
Sardines. That's our class nickname. When we came down in 1996, class 96, there was 30. Let's see, there's about 35 of us Americans and 9 international astronauts, and so we were the biggest class ever. I think we're tied for it. And so since there were so many of us, they call us the Sardines. So we were packed together so well.
Was there a lot of competition between you and your sardine brethren?
It was actually much more cooperation, which was great because everybody got along really well, and we really cooperated. We helped each other. There was not a sense of competition. And the funny thing is, when we got some lectures from some of the Apollo program folks, and they were telling us how competitive it was back then. They were, because there were few flights and they were far between, and they're going to the moon. So they were very competitive. And that wasn't the way at all with us, at least in the shuttle program. Now I can understand how that maybe be starting that back, now if the Artemis program is going on, because these are pretty big missions that are going to happen, and so you can imagine there'll be probably more competition than there was back then. But with the shuttle, we knew that if we cooperated and graduated, it was pretty much a good chance we're going to fly, and so we kind of celebrated everybody's successes.
That's nice.
Fantastic. Ah. I don't know where else to go. Funny question from a fan of ours and a friend of mine. Speaking of the moon, do you think it would be easier to moonwalk on the moon than it is to do it here on Earth?
Not in a spacesuit, that's for sure. Not well. I used to do that when I was younger. When I was in college, I could do the moonwalk, but that would be tough in a spacesuit.
I tried. I can never get it working. I'm not going to bother. My kids can do it. I can't.
Another question that we had from one of our listeners: what was the hardest part about feeling gravity again when you would come back?
Yeah, when you come back, it's an adaptation process when you go up and when you come back. When you go up, a lot of people get sick because your vestibular system is off, and so without the force of gravity, you can't tell what's up and what's down. And so for the first few days, you kind of keep what we call a 1G orientation. So even though there's no floor and ceiling, the way you've trained in the trainers, you keep that up and down. So you walk on the floor and you float along the floor and you keep your heads up and stuff like that for the first few days. After 4 or 5 days, then you can do the stupid astronaut tricks and stuff. But if you get up beforehand, you'll get sick pretty quick. So you get used to it after a few days, and then you can start floating around like you live up there, and it feels very natural. You feel like, yeah, this is the way it should be. So it's pretty nice. And so then when you come home, you start coming down, and it's kind of fun because you tie off a bunch of stuff like your helmet bag and some snacks and stuff or whatever, or drink bags off your chair, off your seat, and then they're all kind of floating around like balloons, and stuff. And so then when you finally start coming in and you start getting just a little bit of G's, they all start coming down, and then all of a sudden they're back on the floor again. And then you start feeling some more G's, maybe 1.5 G's or so, and you feel so heavy. It's pretty impressive. And then you land and it's wheel stop, and it's like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get out of this chair? And so you unstrap, and I remember the first mission, I kind of unstrapped and walked over to the window, and I could see the palm trees swaying, and at the edge of the runway in Kennedy Space Center. What a beautiful sight that was, and it's like a bit of euphoria, because you've done the mission, everything went well, and you live to tell about it, and you're going to see your family in an hour or so, and so it's a great feeling. There's nothing like that.
Oh, nice. I didn't know that you got to see your family that quickly after you got off a flight.
I thought it was like a day or because two. Because you get out of the shuttle, you go into this transfer van, and you get in there and you get out of your spacesuit and stuff. And if you're feeling good, not everybody is, but if you are, you can get out and you can walk on the runway and you can walk around the vehicle. And so you walk around the vehicle, and you just have to be careful not to put your head up or twist your head too fast, because that'll make you fall over. And so you do that, you walk around, then you get back on the transfer van, they take you back, and they do a few medical tests and stuff, and then you get to see your family, and they basically release you and say, okay. And so I'd usually go to Cocoa Beach, and I remember I'd go to get pizza down at Cocoa Beach, and it's a strange sensation though, because for a couple of weeks you were in quarantine, and then you're up in space for 2 weeks, and so you're around just these four or five or six people, and you're used to the small confined environment. All of a sudden, you're downtown in a restaurant. Where did all these people come from? It just feels really, really pretty strange.
That's such. I wonder how many people. I'm sure people in the Cocoa Beach know it. I'm sure, but how many are there out for pizza one night, realizing just the guy at the table and over just landed from space.
Yeah, the funny thing was on my last mission,
so
my last mission, my dad, he stayed at the Hilton, I think it was in Cocoa Beach, and being my dad, he liked to brag and stuff, so he would be talking to the people at the front desk. Yeah, that's my son up in space, so he'd be telling all of them what he's doing and stuff like that. And so I come back that day, and I go with my dad to his hotel, and he goes at the front desk and he goes, "This is my son Rex," and she goes, "Oh, okay, nice to meet you." You mean the one that was just up there, because she was just watching me on TV, a day or so ago up in space, So she was pretty taken aback by the fact that I was just walking around there.
That's
I guess
one of
folks
my
around there are
questions.
kind of used to it.
Yeah.
That's one of my questions. Like, as your dad's talking with his friends, and they're all talking about their kids' achievements, and he just sits there quietly smiling while their kid's a doctor, their kid's a lawyer, and he just sits there and just waits patiently to drop the astronaut hammer. Yep, astronaut. Later.
I mean, in terms of being able to top those experiences, I'm sure, as you said, like you're taking mental pictures the whole time because these are things that you might never get a chance to experience again. But then afterwards, how did you find that process of transitioning into the real world, so to speak? I know that you've done a lot of work since then for Axiom and now Blue Origin that are still within that same field. But
Yeah.
what was that process like for you?
So after the first flight, it's not so hard because you want to fly again, and there's a reasonable chance you're going to. So you kind of get back into your technical job in the astronaut office. So after my first mission, I was a spacesuit representative. So I was the astronaut office representative to the spacesuit program. And then unfortunately, the Columbia accident happened, and that was a very tough time. And so we spent years trying to recover from that and figure out ways to replace to repair the
Mm-hmm.
shuttle if something happened like that. So, but then eventually flew there, and so then on the after my second flight, I thought, well, I'm probably not going to get a chance to fly again. I told my wife, I really want to fly once more. I wanted to fly twice at least. I didn't want the Columbia accident to stop me from flying again. And so, she said, okay, but if you don't want me to, I won't fly anymore after that, because I understand it's a lot to ask and stuff. And so, um,
Sure.
my then as I had a bout of cancer when I was after my second flight, and it was a prostate cancer, and so
Oh.
um, I figured I wasn't going to get a chance to fly again, but you could potentially recover from that and potentially fly again. And so I remember on the way into the hospital, my wife said, "Well, after this, if you want to fly again, you can." And I wasn't gonna, she felt sorry for me. I wasn't going to hold her to it, but it was really sweet. And so I thought,
Oh.
that's really sweet. But it gave me something to look forward to a little bit. So I went through the
Yeah.
treatment, went through surgery, and it was cured of the cancer and stuff. And after a year of being cancer free, you could fly again. And so I wasn't going to hold my wife to it. But yeah, if you want to, okay, if you really want to, fly again, there's only a few flights left at this time. And so I said, great. So there were, at this time, there was only 3 flights going to be left. There's STS 31, I'm sorry, 32, 33, and 34. STS 133, 134, and 133 and 134. So anyways, those 3 flights were left. And so I went to the chief of the office, said, hey, I'm going to be okay. I can be back up, by the end of the year, so I could fly on any of these 3 flights. So I'd like to volunteer for them. They go, okay, so then they announced those 3 flights, and was coming up to my time to fly again. So I knew I was getting in the rotation. You kind of tell when it's time to get assigned again. And so,
Mm-hmm.
but they made those 3 assignments, and I didn't get on any of them. So, oh crap, well, I'm never gonna get to fly in space again. That's it. And it's kind of like being at Disneyland and getting to the front of Space Mountain, and they closed the line. Dang, I was getting
Oh,
so close. But then they started talking about STS 135 adding a final shuttle flight. And originally it was going to be just a rescue mission, not going to fly unless STS 134, the previous flight, had a problem and you had to go get them, and bring them back home. And so they said, okay, they're going to try to name a crew here, and to be, at least be the rescue crew, maybe be a real flight. And so, I was all over that and said, oh, you definitely want to fly on that. And sure enough, I got assigned to that flight. And even though it was just a rescue flight, I knew they were going to fly it. It's like, Americans never leave one firework left in the box. They fire them all off. There's not going to let one shuttle and one tank and yeah, we're going to just we'll just disassemble it and take it apart. No, they're going to fire it off. And so, sure enough, after a few months, they said, okay, we're going to make it a real flight. And so I flew that flight, and it was unique in the respect that it was the last flight. But for us flying, it was like you have a training flow to do, and you got a job to do, and it's just like any other flight from its perspective. But every once in a while, there'd be somebody at the Cape who would come up to me and say, or somewhere and say, hey, I just want you to know I've been working here for 25 years and this is my last day. I go, I'm so sorry, But then I say, don't be sorry. To a person, they would say, no, I loved working this program. It was so fun and I wouldn't trade it for the world. And they were so encouraging and so upbeat about it. It was awesome, So we flew the flight and then, it was a kind of a whirlwind of activity. We had a lot of things to do, of traveling and stuff like that. But then it started sinking. Well, the program is over. For a lot of people, they had already gotten over it. But for us, there was so much going on. It was a couple of months before we said, "Wow, the program really is over." So it took a while to get used to that. But then I loved being part of the program, regardless of whether I flew or not. For me, it was a no brainer to stay in the space business. And so. I stayed at JSC for a while, and then I went over to Axiom, and now I'm at Blue Origin. So I just still love being part of the program.
That's fantastic.
That's so nice.
Space is awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's fun to be a part of, because I remember I always thought, we kind of missed out not being in the Apollo I was too young for that anyways, but that was something. Going to the moon was amazing, and so, so it'd be so cool to work that. And I started after my final flight, before my final flight, I was working on the so actually after the last flight, I was working on the Orion program. So I was working on Orion, but we weren't going back to the moon yet, but there was a glimpse of it. It's like, this is fun. I really enjoyed that, And then we started, getting, okay, the space program's coming back from a lunar perspective. And so I said, this is great work in this, And so now that we really do have, the Artemis program and we're going to the moon, it is really exciting, So I'm really enjoying it, and especially after Artemis 2, just to, we really are going back to the moon, And I knew those guys, and it was fun to see them going back to the moon. And then, working with my company, working on lunar lander for Artemis 3 or 4, it's like, this is so fun. Even though I'm not a crew member, and everybody would love to be a crew member, but it's just fun to be part of this program, going back to the moon, doing this really, really cool thing.
Just to be involved in it at all, I'm sure must be so magical. Exactly.
It's awesome.
If you're not going back to the moon, are you in a position rather that you can at least send a memento along with the crew or with the lander once it gets finally going over there?
I probably wouldn't. It would be fun to do that, but they've got their families and friends that they would want to do that, so I wouldn't even feel comfortable asking somebody to take something along. Like I said, I've got Apollo 10 parachutes, so parts of it, so I got my little mementos anyways, and for my flight, so it's just cool to realize, when we flew in the Artemis program, when I'm working on with Blue Origin now, and if we get to see our lander land on the moon, I mean, there's nothing like that. My handprints would be all over that. Not necessarily the hardware, but of the design of that vehicle. So that'll be really rewarding to see it fly.
Fantastic.
What, if I can ask, what sort of aspects of the design are you working on?
Sure, I'm mostly working on the crew aspects, so the crew integration. So how the crew fly the vehicle, the displays, the restraints, how they handle emergencies, all that kind of stuff. So anything the crew interfaces with is what I'm working on.
Very cool.
That's cool. Super cool.
Obviously, making sure that the crew members have a place to change in privacy will be a
that's right. Yeah,
top priority.
Right. Yep, that's one of them.
That's fantastic.
Benjamin,
I know that you had millions of questions.
I do. The bulk of NASA mission patches are either circular or oval, the massive bulk of them. And if you're going to fly, odds are you're going to get a round or oval mission patch. You've flown 3 times, and not one of them it's round or oval. You have a hexagon, you have a square and a square, you have a diamond like you're wearing on your shirt now with
Yeah.
the flames are just coming out the bottom. I got to know, which one's your favorite of the three that you flew?
Um, my wife designed all three of them, so it's
Did
kind of like
she?
picking your
How
kid. Yeah, she
wonderful.
sure did. Yeah, she's a graphic designer, and so she had a chance to put a bunch of options in front of the crew and stuff. And fortunately, our crews let her design stay. The problem, some of the patches you can tell are designed by a committee. They're just like they got everything on. You go, come on, they're just like, make some simplicity, a little bit. So some of them are a little bit rough, but for her, she made a bunch of designs, and the crews made their inputs and stuff like that. But for the most part, they stayed pretty close to the designs that she suggested and stuff. And so I love them all, but I think my favorite probably is the last one, STS 135. I think that turned out pretty neat.
I think it's
It's a
gorgeous.
very
I
cool
love the
design.
big Omega that
Yeah.
represents like the last
Yep.
fighter.
Yep.
I guess that answers my next question, which was going to be whether you've worn any patches designed by Tim Gagnon, who's a previous guest on the show. But
No, I know Tim, but yeah, I haven't done any of these patches since I had my built-in graphic designer. I didn't need Tim's help.
She's on the show next. That's it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
We have we have so many more questions, but I also want to be conscious of your time. We have a rapid fire round of questions that we can transition to in a moment. Benjamin, were there any final other questions you wanted to get to before that?
Since we're kind of transitioning into the funnier bits, I'll just ask, as a UC Berkeley grad, do you know where the secret parking spots are for a graduation? I'm going to one on Monday, and I don't know if I should take BART or if I should just try and find a parking spot. My nephew is graduating astrophysics, and I need to know how to get there.
Well, I'll tell you a secret. Now, you probably don't want to do this, but you go to LeConte Hall or behind LeConte Hall, and there's a special parking lot, and the label on it says NL, which means the only people
Oh
who can park there
yes.
are Nobel laureates. So
Yep.
Yeah.
that'd be the best place to park if you're allowed to park there.
I'm so gonna try it one day. Nah, I'll probably just take a picture.
Nobel laureates and astronauts. I feel like they should definitely update that. Come on.
I think they should. Well, it makes you wonder how many astronauts came out of Berkeley. I don't think it would be that
There's
many.
a
I
handful
know
of
one
us,
for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Really?
I know
Is there a
me
handful?
and Leroy Chow, and there's some other ones who went through graduate degrees there, and Woody Hoberg got a PhD from there, I think. So it's one of the newer astronauts. So there's a few of us.
Wow. You deserve parking spots. When I go there on Monday,
Yeah.
I'll mention it to them. Okay. This is the final bit where we call it our questions and quibbles. A nice round prime number of questions that are just interesting. You want to start us off, Kovi, or should I go first?
Go for it.
All right. First off, 11 questions. Here's number 1. What is the weirdest thing you believed as a kid?
The weirdest thing I believed as a kid. That's a good one. Boy, I can't think of something. It was something weird. What answers have you had similar to that?
Oh golly. Tooth Fairy was real, I think was one. And
Yeah. So that would probably be one. Tooth Fairy. Yep. Definitely believed. I believed in Santa Claus to a little bit of a later age, the most because my brother was so good at. They had sleigh bells that they'd go up on the roof and make sounds and stuff, and so they were quite good at that. So they were pretty good at keeping us believing that Santa Claus was real.
Are we talking
Right.
like 6 or 7, or like into your early 20s? What?
I don't know. It was not that long. No, it was probably when we were 8 or 9 or something like that.
That's fair. That's not too bad.
7 or 8.
Okay, the next question. Which teacher had the biggest positive impact on you?
That'd be Mrs. Byington was my 5th and 6th grade teacher, and I had a chance to thank her for she did, and she actually came to one of my launches. But she was, like I say, I'm a fifth and sixth grade. She really taught me how to work hard, but to make it fun too. We did all sorts of fun projects in class and stuff. But she worked as hard. And when I took her for fifth grade, I thought, well, do I really want to, take her for sixth grade too, because it was so hard. But then I realized, no, I learned a lot, and it was really good. So she really inspired me. So she was my favorite teacher.
Nice.
That's awesome. So you brought her to a launch. That's beautiful.
Yeah, that was neat. So she had a little scrapbook she gave me before she passed away. It was neat to see. So that was neat.
Oh. Next question. What is one scientific discovery you wish you could have witnessed in person?
Scientific discovery. Wish I could have seen him in person.
Or it could be space flight related if that's your jam.
Yeah, I wish I could have seen I wish I could have been in person for the Apollo 11 liftoff. That would have been pretty spectacular. I wish I could have seen a Saturn V launch. And hopefully I'll get a chance to see one of the Artemis SLS launches. That would be pretty cool. But to see a rocket go up and realize those three people are going to the moon, that'd be pretty darn cool. Especially the first ones. Like, man, that's a really gutsy program, trying to go to the moon for the very first time.
That is amazing. That would I can imagine. I've only seen the SpaceX launch. That would be amazing. And a ULA launch. Sorry.
Cool. Yep. You ever made it to a shuttle launch?
My wife, I'm in California, so it's not really I'm in Foster City, so pretty close. You know where that is.
Yeah.
And I never made it out to Florida for a launch, and our honeymoon was going to be perfect. It was just happened to line up with a shuttle launch, and then just a couple months before Columbia happened, and so I still went to Kennedy's, and it was gorgeous, and I walked around with my jaw on the floor, and my wife has lots of silly pictures of me just being stunned at every turn.
Yeah.
But I did not. That's the closest I got.
Yeah. Well, you got to go down there now for an Artemis launch then.
Heck yeah.
I would love to make one of my next trips to the US align with that, and we could make a road trip out of it. It would be fun.
Heck yeah.
Where do you live, Kovi?
I'm in Sydney, in Australia. If you couldn't tell by the silly accent, yeah, that's. All right. If you had to pick one historical scientist to go bowling with, who would it be?
Probably Alexander Graham Bell. I read a little bit about him in one of the books. He seemed like he was a really dedicated person. He was he was trying to help when James Garfield got shot. If you ever read the book about that, it's really interesting how he tried to develop basically kind of like a metal detector to find out where the bullet was in James Garfield's body. And so he seemed like an interesting person, obviously with all his inventions and stuff too.
Very cool.
Next question. If you were a sandwich, what kind of sandwich would you be?
I would be a, let's see, I would probably say a turkey with provolone. That's my go-to sandwich.
Good sandwich. That's a good sandwich.
Solid. All right. A more serious question. What is your most controversial opinion about pizza?
My most controversial one is the best ones are and it's probably not too common, but the best ones are the ones in Italy that something don't have quite as much cheese on them, but they have great sauce and they're thin crust, and pretty much anywhere in the true Italian pizzas, the margherita pizzas with just cheese, maybe some ham or tomatoes on them. That's the best in my opinion.
Nice.
Good answer. What is your favorite scientific word or phrase?
My favorite scientific word or phrase is how about nominal? I like nominal. That's what you like to hear. And ascent was nominal. Performance was nominal. Perfect. So I like nominal.
Nice and normal. Nice and easy.
Yep.
I wasn't sure whether you're going to use that as your answer for that question or for this next question, which is, what is your least favorite scientific word or phrase?
The least favorite is, yeah, anomaly. Probably anomaly. Something's going
Anomaly.
wrong. Or terminate or abort. So I'll any one of those. Probably abort's probably the worst one. Abort.
Mm.
So the closest we came to it wasn't really an abort, but on both my first two flights, we didn't have any alarms going up at all. So you practice your simulations and everything's going wrong. So you can handle a bunch of alarms and stuff that happen. And so, but on my last mission, got not too far along, we get this boop, and we look at it says DPDT, which means delta pressure over delta time, which means you're possibly losing air, and I looked up and I thought it was a big leak, so almost big enough to cause an abort, which would be a return to launch site abort. Which, if for the shuttle, that means you fly backwards, and then you're going backwards, flying through your flames, and then come back, push yourself back toward the Kennedy Spacer and land. Never been done, never want to do it. So abort's a scary word. Fortunately, it was just cabin stretch, so it wasn't a problem. Actually, they go, no, you can ignore that. And go, well, thanks, that's good to know. So.
Wow. Okay. I didn't know that was even a maneuver you could do.
Yeah. Return to launch site abort. Take a look at it.
I knew that there was that
watch
thing,
it.
but I
Look
didn't know you
over.
had to go
Look it on the
backwards.
internet. You'll see it. It's a weird maneuver, but you get up out of the atmosphere, turn around, drop the tank, and glide back to the Kennedy Space Center.
Crazy. Wow. All right. What is your favorite useless science fact?
Favorite useless science fact. One that's, you'd think it wouldn't be useless. The world is round. How many people ask me, is the world really round? I tell them, no, it's
Really?
flat. It's flat. You go straight across, and then you get the corner, you go right around that when you go with the backwards, and you come right around the top again, so you do get that one. People don't seem to understand that. Yes, the world is round.
Oh my god!
It's so trivial that it's practically useless.
Yep. Yes, yeah.
Oh, I think that's probably my new favorite answer to that question.
Yeah, and it's coming from a place of authority. I mean, this is somebody who's been to the edge, he's seen the edge of the Earth, he's gone around the other side, he's seen the turtles.
Yeah.
When the Artemis 2 crew came back and the people were helping getting them out of the capsule, one of the guys that was helping them had a sticker on the back of his helmet. It says, "The Earth is round, be checked." I love that.
Very good.
Nice. All right, penultimate question, number 10. If you could rename one planet in our solar system, what would you call it?
Let's see. A new planet. Would probably name it something someplace I know, like after California or Colorado or something like that. So I would probably have to name it after one of the states I like.
Planet California. Has a nice ring to it.
I love that. I like that a lot, especially since I'm in California. And Colorado's beautiful.
Sure, yeah.
All right, it's gorgeous. All right, last question. If you had to sing one karaoke song to save humanity from an alien invasion, what would it be?
Let's see. The ones I've done before probably would be "I Can't Help Falling in Love with You" by Elvis. So.
Oh.
That's a good one. That's a nice one.
Yep.
It's for the aliens, it'll be "Kill them with kindness." Just make them fall in love with you, and then they'll stop invading Earth.
That's right.
Perfect.
Amazing. This has been such an incredible episode. It might be one of our longest episodes. Thank you so much for your time and entertaining all of our silly questions.
My pleasure. It's fun to talk with people who really enjoy it and follow the program and stuff. So I enjoy talking with you guys and
If you ever
sharing
find your way
experiences.
back up to the Bay Area, I have a couple scout troops. I would love to talk to you. If you ever
All
come up
right.
this way, scouts
If
are dying.
if folks want to learn more about you, your experiences, is there anywhere online that you could direct them to, or any resources?
Just interviews like this, and things like that that I've done over the years and things and stories like that, and my bio is out there and stuff like that. But that's just the basic things. I didn't write a book or anything like that.
You should. It'd be an incredible story.
Yeah.
Maybe they could make a movie and get Ryan Gosling to play you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Who would play you in a movie? Actually is a question I got.
Oh, I don't. Matthew Broderick. I don't know.
I like that a lot, actually. That would be fantastic.
We'll have to get him on the show and ask him if he's keen to do that. Surely
Yeah.
he'd say yes.
But only if it's like a ditching class to go to space kind of
Yeah.
kind of movie.
We're talking Ferris Bueller's Day Off the Planet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Matthew Broderick, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Folks who want to find other episodes that we've done, they can check us out on all the social media platforms. You can find me at Fun Fact Science on all the social medias. Benjamin, where can the good people find you?
Look up Science Actually on Facebook. That's the big one. And look up the Nerd and the Scientist show anywhere you listen to your podcast, which you're doing right now. Or you can watch this show on YouTube, and you can see all the clips on YouTube and TikTok and where else? Instagram, the whole shebang. We're gonna put Rex
everywhere. Amazing. And thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the next episode of Science Actually Presents The Nerd and the Scientist.